Welcome to Helping Leaders Achieve What Matters. With me today is Jamie Mason Cohen. Jamie worked with Lorne Michaels of Saturday Night Live for over 3 years. He's given a great TED Talk. He's the author of a book, and he's a Vistage speaker who I happened to meet, and he did 3 Vistage talks a couple of months ago, and he was so fantastic that I asked him to come back and speak to all of the Vistage chairs in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. So please welcome Jamie Mason Cohen.
Mark, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
And it's great to have you here. So one of the things that I loved about the workshops that you gave is that it really uplifted everyone. I mean, everyone walked out of there in a better spirit. The rest of the afternoon was amazing. And you started off the workshop with a couple of questions. And those questions were, why is being here today important to you, to your company, to your family, and to the community? So I'll ask you that same question.
Why is being here today important? Well, first of all, you and I have worked together, like you said, several times in the past few months. I learn from you every time we speak. So I see you as a guide, as a facilitator, as a coach. And that today is what leadership is all about. It's being a facilitator, it's being a coach, it's being a mentor and being a guide on the side, not a sage on the stage. And you, my friend, are all of those.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So why would this be important to your family?
Well, it would be important to my family because I think every time I get the chance to discuss leadership and the forms that I want to bring more into the world and impact groups like Vistage, it actually makes me a better man and a better father. What I have learned in the process of delivering these talks and my cumulative experience working at Saturday Night Live, working as an entrepreneur, running my own media company, and helping other businesses grow is that personal development is leadership development. So that when you develop yourself, you're developing your leadership, you're developing on a professional level. And so being a better communicator, which is one of the things I teach businesses, helps me be a better communicator with my wife, Karen, and with our kids, with my extended family, with colleagues. I mean, I notice that now when I go into speaking events where I speak with Vistage groups, and in Canada, the Canadian version tech, I also speak with groups of 200, 300 people where I just did a tour across Canada to 5 different provinces. And I used to cringe a little bit. This is a full disclosure. When I was asked to be a part of the pre-event or post-event conference events, because I thought, oh, that's a lot of small talk. And as a natural introvert, where I gain energy more inwardly, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to speak with 30, 40, 50, 80 strangers. And now I look forward to it. And it's just been a few years because of these kinds of conversations with some of the top leaders in the world in their field like you.
I love that. And the second part of the exercise is that the person that interviewed you and asked you those questions would share what was the gift or the lesson that they learned. And, I'm also an introvert. So the gift that you just gave me is a great question to ask at those events, because I also hate those pre-event and post-event affairs. So just asking them this question is, why are you here? And you had a couple of other alternative questions, like I think, what do you appreciate about being here? So you're not asking the same one in case somebody overheard you time after time.
Yeah, well, the reason that you ask people that question, and that's a question I usually start with or a variation, why is it important for you to be here? It sounds so simple, even obvious, but usually as leaders, you might not articulate or express your purpose. And it's essential because if you have a room of people where you ask that question, it's not just coming from you. In the case of Vistage, you're asking your team, what is your reason for being here? What is meaningful about showing up today? Or it could be specific. It could say, why is a specific job, task, a project, or any type of situation that they're going through at work important to them? And the reason you ask a team that and you start off that way, like we did, even before we dove into content, is because it sets the tone. It sets the tone, and purpose is a way to help people tap into what their most urgent, deep, meaningful reason beneath the surface that matters to them. And when they can express that to a team and everybody is on that same level of expressing their personal purpose, what that does is it connects everybody together, even if they have slightly different purposes to the greater purpose. In the case of Vistage, to being part of this mastermind, this think tank to help each other. And it raises, like you said, even within the first 15 minutes, the consciousness of the room, so that when we get to what really the heart and the substance of the content, everybody has already been elevated to a point where they're ready and they're inspired.
Yes. And that's so critical for leaders. I mean, to engage people. I think the latest Gallup survey said 85% of the working population is disengaged, and we hear about 59% silent quitting. How do we engage people? Just what you're saying right here is that we ask them why it matters, what their purpose is for being here, to connect them and get them all on the same page.
Exactly. And that's a takeaway right now, which is what we just did here within the first few minutes, which is you asked me that question. Somebody asked me in this workshop that I just gave for a few hundred people in Kingston, Ontario, about 3 hours from Toronto. And they were in the food industry. And he said to me, I'm engaged as the leader, but some of my team members are not. What do you think I should do? What would be your advice? And I turned it back on this question. I said, you've got to tap into their personal purpose, because they're either going to be able to articulate that or they're not. And if they're not able to, that gives you really crucial data points as to ask and figure out why they're not engaged, why their work isn't meaningful. Peter Drucker, as well as several other leaders like Marcus Buckingham, some of the leading leadership researchers, said that if your team, when you ask them, cannot answer a version of this question, then you might have to do some homework to figure out why. And the question was, do I, if I'm working on your team, get to use my strengths every day at work? Do I get to utilize what I'm good at, what I was hired in this business to do every day, or at least consistently? And Marcus Buckingham said, if the answer is yes, then you will have overall quite an inspired team. You'll be able to retain your top workers. But if they can't answer that question, or they say rarely, or yeah, I wish, but I've never gotten the chance, then your soul searching can be why that is the case and how you can reverse that to give them projects or put them on tasks where they show up. Because when we use our strengths, it's been shown that workers, employees are 30% more productive and engaged. And when they don't, they go down dramatically when they don't get to use their strengths. And it can start with the why question to get us there.
Well, that's one of the things that you taught me in the 4 workshops that we did together is this process called appreciative inquiry, which I had not heard of before. And I was so intrigued by it after I learned it from you that I studied appreciative inquiry. And it's a different way of asking questions that can help bring out the strengths and elevate the consciousness and the mood of people. Can you share a little bit about appreciative inquiry and what you use it for in these workshops that you give?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing I've noticed with Vistage chairs when we have our pre-calls is sometimes they talk about strategy, right? Like strategy is a core component. And what I love about this, before we talk about it in the context of what appreciative inquiry questioning is it merges strategy and execution within a short time frame. So it doesn't separate strategy, because companies are usually quite good at planning. But when it comes to execution, that's a whole different story. And In leadership development, Harvard Business Review did a study and they found that 80% of leadership development initiatives fail within companies, both mid-size like Vistage and bigger like Fortune 50 companies, because the execution component fails. So appreciative inquiry is a possibility focused form of strategy in which you go through a 4 to 5 step process to execute on those outcomes that matter most. And here are 3 reasons why it works. Number 1 is it focuses with laser sharp accuracy on intended outcomes. 2, it's strength-based. So it doesn't ignore the problems, but what it does is it helps the organization leverage and unite the strengths so that the weaknesses become insignificant. And 3 is it shows different types of thinkers where they are in the process. So if you notice my eyes, are we at step 1? Now we're in step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and we don't jump ahead until we have mastered or gone through each of those steps. And very briefly, and you can follow up if you want to on this, because you know this now, because we've done it together, is the 5-step process has many names, but what we did when we did the Tri-State Chair and Trusted Advisor event recently was we started with defining what the opportunity is, not the problem, because problems reduce our energy. And that kind of issue processing works, but sometimes it works despite our best efforts because people are exhausted by focusing on problems all the time. We start with the definition of what the challenge is. We reframe it into an opportunity. 2 is we discover. We go back to the past and we look at what has worked in the past so that we can take what's worked in the past and move it forward. Most change management initiatives, maybe not most, some change management initiatives fail because people only focus on the change. They don't tell the team, let's look at what is not going to change first. So we look at what's not going to change, what's worked in solving this problem. 3, the dream. Now we pull forward those strengths of what's worked in the past, of what's not going to change, and we say, what could be? Let's create a vision, right? Because as leaders, you're a leader, you know that, it's a creative vision. So it's to create that vision. And then 4 is design. We want to design from that dream. How are we going to implement this? Like, what does that look like? What's the prototype if you have a product or the service? How are we going to visualize that for people who don't know about this product? How are we going to pitch it? And then finally is deployment. That's the execution. If we don't have 1 to 4, the 5th becomes abstract and we don't get there. So define, discover, dream, design, and deploy. That's appreciative inquiry, strategic framing of your next problem into an opportunity.
And the results were amazing. I mean, we have an issue process that we've been using since 1957 at this stage. And it starts off with, like, what is the issue that you're experiencing? And I noticed that sometimes it is kind of a down energy. And when we did this appreciative inquiry, I've been doing this it's another tool in my Vistage meetings, is that it elevates. People like to think about, what worked in the past, and how can I leverage what worked in the past in this situation? And something happens. It just opens up possibilities, and people feel better about the situation than other ways of issue processing.
Yeah, and it goes back to that data, which, if you don't believe me, if you don't take my word for it, Marcus Buckingham, Peter Drucker, and Case Western University all came to the same conclusion, which is when we focus on our strengths, they grow. There's something in nature called the heliotropic effect. And heliotropic effect in science shows that when the sun hits the front of the sunflower, it blossoms. But when it hits the back, it shrivels up. And so human beings are like that too. Maybe not everyone. There might be someone listening and saying, no, you know what? I like processing based on problems. I like to deal with the problems. And that's okay. But for example, if you're a Vistage chair listening to this, or a tech chair, and you have a member who's not responding in the way that you want because you're their coach, you're their facilitator, All you need to do is shift to a possibility focused model, because the data shows us that more and more people respond to focusing on their strengths and amplifying that, so that their weaknesses or areas they're not strong in become less significant, and they move toward the goals that they set.
Yes. And one of the things I read when I was studying this was that the question changes the person. The questions are transformational. So it's so important that we, as chairs, as leaders, ask questions.
Yes.
And what are
Yeah.
the kinds of questions that you would say are appreciative inquiry? I know you've shared a few, but do you have any other examples of what we could focus on as leaders?
Absolutely. You could ask questions such as, and these are either paraphrased or the kind of questions you can take to your group tomorrow, whether you're a chair or you're a leader of a mid-sized company. You could ask, what are your strengths as they relate to this possibility? You could ask, what opportunities do you see in this situation?
Hmm.
You could ask, what do you most aspire to create? What action or goal are you most committed to? When you create this new opportunity, what becomes possible? What resources do you need? With Vistage, you've got this extraordinarily diverse and rich human resource pool around you, not just with your group in particular, but also other Vistage members you can reach out to. And what could you connect with to further this effort? Always get them forward thinking. It's a strength-based model. Even though we look back, ultimately we're looking forward. One question that I like is, what do you want to be celebrating 8 months from now or 12 months from now when it comes to taking action on this particular project or goal? Those are appreciative inquiry.
I loved it. I loved it. And the group was so energized the way that you facilitated that, so that every single person was working on something that they had a dream about, or a situation, or that they wanted to improve. And you broke us up into small groups, and they were buzzing after that. It really made a big difference in the day. Then you did some other unique things in the workshop. I don't know if you want to share what they, or that your secret sauce that you want to keep secret, what we did after we did that.
Well, can you remind me what you're referring to?
Well, we set candles around and people laid down on a bench and the room got very dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we did a living eulogy, and that might sound a little bit odd, but
Yes.
the living eulogy, which is not something I might recommend to groups, business groups, or think tanks, or even companies where there's not a high level of safety and knowledge about other people on some level. But simply what it was a chance to practice vulnerability within a professional setting, which is something that most business groups are not very good at doing as a whole. There might be individuals who express how they feel in an appropriate way, but a lot of people at work still feel a bit uncomfortable about sharing not just what's not working, which is a healthy form of vulnerability to admit mistakes. I tell leaders it's good to admit mistakes, but also about how they feel positively about other people. So I wanted to model by having the group go through a ceremony which has spiritual overtones, but not religious, where we had a circle, because a circle represents a form of reconciliation, democracy. When we're all in this circle, we're all equal and it's fully inclusive. And that's what I see when I'm in a Vistage room. So it fully fit in with the ethos of Vistage. But in that circle, what we did was, and we actually had a half circle with one group based on our incredible backdrop of the Washington Square Hotel, where Bob Dylan lived in room 305 when he first came to New York from Minnesota, and Bo Diddley played, and Ernest Hemingway stayed, and Joan Baez. But we had the Washington Square Hotel bar and restaurant downstairs. And what we did was we made this circle, and I set it up, and I invited members of your groups, different days, to lie down. Yes, we actually had people lie down on benches dressed to the nines. And we had other members of the group step forward if they wanted. It's always optional, and offer what they admired about this person. And It's a bit awkward at first because people are looking around, and that's a level of vulnerability you might not even show to people you've known for for decades. But people started stepping forward once that first person volunteered to lie down with their eyes closed and share what they admired about them. Or a good alternative question might be, what's something that you've never said before to this person that you wish you would have said before they passed? And if you're superstitious and you don't like that level of when they passed, that you've never said to that person before. And people, I don't think I'm exaggerating, got emotional, if not fully crying. These are all adults, all successful business owners. They were moved genuinely. I know that because they told me afterwards as well. And we could have done that all afternoon, which we didn't because we had a lot of other things on the agenda. But we did that for a certain amount of time with a certain amount of members. And what that showed us is that vulnerability is not just telling people things, it's accepting compliments and praise. I'm not very good at that either. Sometimes when someone compliments me, I do this. I noticed I did this once. If you've ever done this, do not do this anymore. Someone gave me a compliment on Zoom and I went like this. Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Like I brushed it away. And afterward, I thought, no, that's not vulnerability. Vulnerability was accepting that. It's not arrogance. It's accepting praise and just saying thank you. So the member who is being given the gift of their other members sharing what they admired about them, they weren't allowed to crack jokes. They weren't allowed to diffuse it or brush it off. They had to just take it. And when they got up, they couldn't make any cracks either. Oh, John, I never knew you thought that. No, they took it and they had to go quietly and stand in the group for about 30 seconds before the next person decided to do it. And so it's shared vulnerability is crucial for teams because people who feel comfortable saying in their head or out loud, can I be myself with these people? Those teams are the most successful in today's working environment. And that's what we modeled for them.
And for me, what I noticed was everyone was all high from the appreciative inquiry exercise and seeing their dreams and their possibilities. But doing this living eulogy, again, the energy of the room shifted. It's like it went from the head into the heart, and it bonded. I mean, the group just kind of really bonded after that. And it was a transformational experience that we don't normally see in an everyday Vistage meeting that is truly unique. So I'm personally very grateful for having learned that, having been able to experience that now 4 times.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I think you've used the word transformational a few times. And in your groups, I really see that transformation. And what I think matters with that word when it comes to a business mastermind at this level is the members of a group. And if you're listening to this and I'm generalizing, let me know afterwards, please, or Mark. But I've done enough to know over the last 3 years, you're brilliant. You're very good at analyzing. You're at the highest level of problem solvers. You come in and your mind is so sharp and on the ball, and your mind is like lightning when it comes to solving your own problems, when it comes to work and others within the group. But you know what sometimes I see lacking or a blind spot is the heart. You're so focused on every day solving 100 problems and meeting after meeting that sometimes you might neglect the human side inadvertently. But that heart is what really retains workers. It makes people want to show up because you're speaking to them not as just a worker, but someone who they know you care about on multiple levels. And it also has been shown that when you speak to the heart and not just the head, anxiousness goes down, well-being goes up. Mark used the word gratitude. That's part of speaking with the heart. So that living eulogy is not just a fun activity to break the 3-hour session. That is deliberately so that we can solve those difficult problems even more effectively because we know that we're in a room where people truly care about us more than what we do, but actually who we are. And that combination of caring about the person beside you, not just to solve business problems, but you care about them as a human being, That is a winning combination for today's leadership.
And what's interesting is that this isn't just Jamie saying this from his experience, but you tied this together with the leadership circle, which is, I think, 3 million people have done it, the research for it so far, on really what are the attributes that make for the most effective leaders. And they've tied this to business performance. Bob Anderson and Bill Adams in their book, I forgot the name of the book.
Mastering leadership.
Mastering Leadership, and the second one was Scaling Leadership. Two of my favorite books.
Yeah.
So you're also a certified leadership circle coach.
Yeah.
How do you tie this all together, this head and the heart, and what it means to really achieve what matters in being an effective leader?
An organization, Mark, can only rise to the creative leadership of its leadership team. And what that means is creative leadership based on the data of the leadership circle. So if you don't know what it is, it's about a 15-year study, give or take, of what makes leaders great. And what they found at looking at, like you said, hundreds of thousands of leaders from different niches and industries, that there's 18 creative competencies or strengths. Strengths are what unleashes energy, motivation, and business performance. The more you have creative competencies or strengths, like Mark is I don't know anyone who represents this more than Mark. I've been saying this behind his back. Personal learner, someone who's a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all. That's one of the 18. Community concern, courageous authenticity, the way you communicate the undiscussable things on your team. These are areas, purpose and visionary combined, that leaders who displayed these type of strengths, their business performance was raised by up to 37%. And the reactive tendencies, if this was a circle, if your mind as a leader, you're listening, your mind is a holistic circle. And you have access to both these creative competencies on the top of the circle and on the bottom of the circle. Those are still strengths. But if they're overextended, overused, or overdepended on, they could become liabilities. So what are those reactive tendencies on the bottom of the circle? That could be arrogance, which is the opposite of the personal learner. That could be overly pleasing, is that you tie your self-worth and identity to caring so much what others think that even if 18 people in your Vistage meeting say it was the best meeting I've ever been in, but 2 people go, it was vanilla, then you're thinking about vanilla ice cream for the next 2 days, right? So we want to, with the leadership circle, help you through this 360 and the data that accompanies it, that Mark is also a certified trainer in. We want to move you in the self-awareness of building your creative competencies so you can raise business performance and also lower your difficult traits, the traits that are getting in your way of showing up as the best possible leader you can be.
And what I thought was beautiful about it is that you take like what's a reactive tendency, let's say it's controlling, and you work across the circle to have more relating. So it's like you move from the head trying to control everything into relating. If you're over relating, you might be into pleasing. And how you move into relating is you move over to this side of the circle with more courageous authenticity, saying the things that may be difficult for you to say, but you're saying it in such a way that people can hear it and relate to it. So it combines this whole head and heart in one integral or holistic circle where you can get an assessment of how you are performing as a leader and what you could do. And they say it's just even one change, one big change, one little change can have a big impact in working on changing one behavior that might be your reactive tendency.
Yes, you're right. And what I also like it about is it's measurable.
Yes.
So you can do this test or this 360 and you'll get data from your team, and it might be uncomfortable because you might see yourself in one particular trait that your team sees it differently. So there's a gap. But if you're honest with yourself, and Vistage and Tech members are amongst the top 1% already in their self-awareness and their willingness to learn and be humble to get this level of feedback. I've seen members of big organizations in finance and pharmaceuticals where I've done the Leadership 360 and they scored moderately low in one area, but they've gone back, even though one of them said that he felt sick for a week because he didn't want to ask his team for more feedback because he felt defensive. He said, no, I think I score high as a compassionate leader. And they're saying I'm not as compassionate as I say I am. Why am I not as compassionate as I want to be? And like you said, we look at the opposite end of the spectrum through the coaching cycle and we say, well, if you're showing up here, how might this be showing up? We analyze it. And then when they retake the test, they jump right up to the top with that one little bit of self-awareness. So you can measure how it impacts the team.
Yes. There's one other thing that you did that I thought was unique and I never saw anyone else do before. You're also, is the right word, a graphologist, a handwriting analysis expert. And I thought it was brilliant because we offered anyone that came to the meeting at 8 o'clock on the dot, and we start at 9. So we got a lot of people there early. We started, on time with everyone there. You would offer to do a handwriting analysis and give them some coaching. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, well, handwriting analysis, it might sound like a novelty or something you'd get out of a Cracker Jack box when you were a kid, or maybe BS pseudo psychology. I get it. I've heard it all. But what it is, it's a fun, accurate personality assessment tool. Uh, Government agencies used to use it. Companies used to look for people to hire, and they used to look at their handwriting. It's not as prevalent anymore in the high tech world we live in. But in jobs I've had in the past, when people found out I did it, they actually asked me, senior members, if I would look at people's handwriting to see who would be a good match for certain positions. And so the way it works is the act of writing starts in your brain, Mark. It sends a signal down the nervous systems to your hand, and your fingers carry out the directive of your brain. So your writing paints a picture of what you think. And each stroke you make on the page is directly correlated to a particular personality trait. And as a handwriting expert, I can see about 100 personality traits and an infinite number of patterns that exist that make you the unique leader you are. So I did a TEDx talk on this, where I looked at leadership traits through the handwriting of some of the most extraordinary leaders in history, like Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr., and modern leaders like Indra Nooyi, the former CEO of Pepsi. And the handwriting is not the end result, but what it is, it's a fascinating and accurate prompt that gets us talking about traits like optimism and determination and confidence. And what does it mean to be a resilient leader? And people love it in the business community. I'm not trying to sell this. This is my experience. I've just done several talks this month where I incorporated it, and people will line up for hours after a talk because people love to learn about themselves. You love to learn about yourself, Mark. I love to learn about myself. And this is a way that I have not seen any tool that's as fast, that is as moving for people, because I can talk about things like how parents impacted them in their life. We go way back as much as someone wants to, and we can talk about strengths, or we can talk about areas where people want to improve, just like the reactive tendencies in the leadership circle. I call them areas for growth. And what is really interesting is that when I do these talks for businesses across the world now, I always give people the option. Do you just want me to talk about your strengths, or do you want me to talk about your strengths and areas of improvement? And do you know what the answer is about 99% of the time? I want you to talk about both.
Yes.
Because people are looking to grow. They're looking to learn. And that's what I love, that what you do with Vistage is you have people committed. No matter how successful they are, they want to get better.
That's the reason why people join. If they already know it all, I love what you said earlier. Know it all aren't going to work at Vistage. We need to learn it all. So that's, I think, the audience that we have are people that are passionate, hungry learners, and that's what I love about being a Vistage chair is I get the really the privilege of being with them on a regular basis every single month. It's unbelievable. Now, you also have a podcast. That's where I saw my handwriting analyzed, and it was wonderful. What's the name of your podcast, and how could people find out more and learn from the interviews that you're doing?
Yeah, I have a podcast called Signature Leadership Show, and I work through a format, and you were one of my guests, where it's the PRO format. The P is the possibility. We start off with what's a possibility you're dealing with this week. There was a sense of urgency to it on a professional or personal level. And then I look at the handwriting and do executive coaching with you, appreciative inquiry, executive coaching, so we can reframe that problem into a possibility. And then O is the opportunity. Before we leave that short podcast, what can we do to help you take action and implement that opportunity? PRO. So I've interviewed leaders like you, Dory Clark, the multiple award-winning author and one of the leading strategists in the world, Mark Bowden, who has the #1 body language YouTube show, and he works with some of the biggest companies in the world. Susan Rowan, who sold 2 million plus books, How to Work a Room, one of the classics of connecting with people. So I am speaking with people who are really good and impactful at solving other people's challenges. And I'm turning the tables back on them and asking them what relatable challenges they might have to help them and help the viewer see that they're not alone in what they're going through, and to see through the journey of these leaders what they can learn to solve their own challenges.
Beautiful. I love watching it. It's also on YouTube, so I watch them on YouTube so I can see the handwriting and the people's facial reactions as you talk to them. What else? Where else could people find information about you besides your podcast and on your YouTube channel?
My website, or on LinkedIn with my full name, Jamie Mason Cohen, for both. And I'd love to connect with you. I really resonate with the audience that you attract, Mark. I've had the opportunity to, like I said at the beginning, to work with you, collaborate, partner, and learn from you as a leader and how you facilitate. Leaders are facilitators, and you really walk your talk. So I would be thrilled to connect with your listeners, because they're a projection and a reflection of you.
Well, thank you, Jamie, and thank you for the difference that you've already made in my life and the lives of my members. And that's a wrap for today. This is Helping Leaders Achieve What Matters, and this was our episode with Jamie Mason Cohen. Thank you.
Thank you.